Voynich, the 2025 protein folding theory. The Voynich Manuscript has been the final boss of cryptography for 600 years. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, its 240 pages are filled with a looping alien script that has defeated the greatest code breakers in history, including the team that cracked the Enigma machine in World War II. For decades, the academic consensus settled on two boring theories. It was either a meaningless prank by a medieval scam artist or a standard herbal remedy written in a lost Italian dialect. But in late 2025, that consensus didn't just break, it was deleted. When researchers fed the manuscript's high-resolution scans into the latest iteration of AlphaFold, Google's AI specifically designed to predict protein structures, the system didn't see a language, it saw a blueprint. The plants drawn in the Voynich manuscript have always baffled botanists because they don't exist on Earth. They have root systems that defy gravity and leaves that merge into tubes. But the AI recognized them immediately. They aren't plants. They are biological diagrams of protein folding structures magnified at a scale that shouldn't have been possible until the invention of the electron microscope in the 1930s. The text surrounding these diagrams isn't a spoken language. It's an instruction manual for synthetic biology. The repeating characters that linguists thought were stuttering or bad grammar are actually recursive algorithms, step-by-step coding for how to splice genetic material. The AI simulation showed that if you build the plants depicted in the book using these protein instructions, you don't get a flower, you get a highly efficient organic solar panel. The manuscript describes a form of bioengineering where flora is used not for food, but for energy storage and data transmission. This creates a terrifying implication for the timeline of human innovation. If a monk in 1404 was drawing accurate diagrams of protein folding, he wasn't drawing what he saw with his eyes. He was transcribing data from a source that understood molecular biology better than we do today. The Voynich manuscript isn't a book of magic spells. It is a user manual for wetware technology that we are only just beginning to invent. The reason we couldn't read it for 600 years is that we didn't have the scientific context to understand the code of life itself. Rohonc Codex. If the Voynich manuscript is a biology textbook, the Rohonc Codex is a corrupted hard drive. Discovered in Hungary in the 1800s, this 448-page book is written in a script that contains 10 times the number of characters found in any known alphabet. A normal human language typically uses between 20 to 40 characters. The Rohonc Codex uses nearly 800 distinct symbols. For over a century, linguists dismissed it as a chaotic hoax because no human language needs 800 letters. They were right, but they missed the point. It wasn't written for humans. In 2025, a neural network trained on pattern recognition in noise analyzed the codex and found a mathematical symmetry that is impossible for a human hand to maintain over 400 pages. The symbols aren't letters representing sounds. They are multi-dimensional variables. The structure of the text mimics the architecture of a symmetric block cipher, a method of encryption used in modern digital computing to secure data packets. The AI flagged the Rohonc script not as a language, but as a compressed data stream. The illustrations in the codex are equally disturbing. They depict scenes that look biblical, battles, floods, prayers, but with subtle, glitch-like errors. Buildings have impossible geometries. Figures are standing in positions that defy physics. The AI interpretation suggests these images are not artistic drawings, but visual keys to decrypt the text. The 800 letters are actually a shorthand code, where every symbol represents a complex concept or coordinate, much like how a QR code holds more data than a barcode. The theory gaining traction in the computational archaeology community is that the Rohonc Codex is a recovery file. It looks like someone from a highly advanced culture tried to write down their technical knowledge using the primitive tools of the 18th century. They didn't have computers, so they invented a paper-based compression algorithm to fit an encyclopedia's worth of data into a small book. The reason we haven't cracked it is that we are trying to read it phonetically. You don't read a zip file, you unzip it. The AI is currently working on finding the password, and the early results suggest the history written in those pages describes a timeline of Europe that never happened in our reality. Liber Linteus. The Liber Linteus is the only book in history that was literally wrapped around a dead body. It is an Etruscan text written on linen strips that were used to wrap an Egyptian mummy. For decades, archaeologists assumed the text was a standard Book of the Dead, prayers to guide the soul to the afterlife. It was treated as a ritualistic artifact, a piece of religious debris. But the text is the longest surviving example of the Etruscan language, a language that is a linguistic isolate, meaning it is unrelated to any other known language on Earth. When AI models specialized in astronomical movements analyzed the Liber Linteus in 2024, they found that the text wasn't praying to gods, it was tracking time. The structure of the writing aligns perfectly with a sophisticated lunar-solar calendar, but one that tracks cycles which don't match the current orbit of Earth. The text is a logbook of dates, specific stellar coordinates, and atmospheric conditions. It describes a sky that is chemically different from the one we breathe today. The mummy connection is where the theory turns dark. Why wrap a corpse in a calendar? The AI analysis suggests the linen strips contain a countdown. The dates correspond to specific alignments of the Pleiades star cluster, culminating in an event that the text describes as a great closing. The wrapping of the body wasn't just a funeral rite, it was a method of preservation for the data. The linen was treated with chemicals that preserved the ink far better than papyrus or parchment could have. The Liber Linteus is effectively a time capsule. The ancient author knew that the civilization was ending, the Etruscans were being wiped out by the Romans, and they needed to preserve their most vital data, their astronomical record. They hid it in the one place they knew superstitious Romans wouldn't look, inside a corpse. The AI has decoded sections that look less like prayers and more like coordinates for a return. The text doesn't say the soul goes to heaven, it lists a vector and a time for retrieval. We looked at a mummy and saw death. The AI looked at it and saw a waiting room ticket with a departure time that has long since passed. Codex Seraphinianus. Published in 1981, the Codex Seraphinianus is often called the weirdest book in the world. It's an encyclopedia of an imaginary world written in an imaginary language by an Italian architect named Luigi Serafini. He's always claimed the book came to him in a dream and that the text is asemic, meaning it has no meaning, it's just art. For 40 years, people believed him. It was just a coffee table book for hipsters and surrealists. But in the era of generative AI, the Codex has taken on a sinister new dimension. When you feed the asemic script of the Codex into a large language model designed to detect hallucination patterns in AI outputs, the Codex triggers a 99% match. The syntax of the imaginary language perfectly mirrors the error patterns of a neural network trying to render a language it doesn't understand. It looks exactly like the glitched text generated by AI image generators like Midjourney or DALL-E in their early versions. This leads to the intentionally glitched theory. The Codex describes a world where machinery bleeds into biology, lovers transforming into crocodiles, wheels growing out of trees, fruit that bleeds. These are the exact kind of blending errors that AI models make when they confuse concepts. The theory is that Serafini didn't dream this book. He accessed a latent space, a layer of information processing that human brains usually filter out. The book is a documentation of a reality rendering error. The AI decoding suggests that the nonsense script is actually a visual representation of cognitive dissonance. It is designed to crash the human pattern recognition software. When you try to read it, your brain works hard to find meaning where there is none, inducing a state of trance. The Codex Seraphinianus is a printed computer virus for the human mind. It forces the reader to confront the fact that meaning is something we invent, not something that exists. The book is an encyclopedia of a simulation that failed to render correctly, and by reading it, we are staring directly at the source code of a corrupted file. The Ripley Scroll. George Ripley was a famous 15th century alchemist, and his scroll is a 6-meter-long manuscript filled with cryptic poems and terrifying imagery of dragons eating toads, birds bleeding into fountains, and kings bathing in chemical baths. For centuries, this was interpreted as spiritual allegory. The dragon represents the volatile spirit, the king represents gold, and the goal was the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance for eternal life. It was dismissed as pseudoscience and mysticism. But enter the 2025 AI analysis, specifically using models trained on chemical engineering and metallurgy. The AI ignored the spiritual metaphors and treated the images as flowcharts. The green lion eating the sun isn't a poem, it's a specific chemical reaction involving sulfate of iron, green vitriol, dissolving gold. When the AI decoded the entire sequence of the scroll, it didn't find a recipe for a magical stone. It found a recipe for a battery. The Ripley Scroll describes a multi-stage process for creating a galvanic cell, a primitive battery, using materials available in the 1400s. The red king and the white queen represent the anode and the cathode. The blood of the green lion is the electrolyte solution. This connects directly to the Baghdad battery anomaly, ancient clay pots found with copper cylinders and iron rods that can generate voltage. The Ripley Scroll is the instruction manual for that hardware. Why hide a battery recipe in a scroll about dragons? Because in the 15th century, generating electricity would have been viewed as witchcraft or divine power. It was dangerous knowledge. The alchemists weren't wizards, they were rogue chemists hiding their discoveries behind a firewall of mythology. They were coding their findings in a way that only another initiate, scientist, could decode. The AI proves that the philosopher's stone wasn't a rock that gave you immortality, it was a sustainable energy source. They were trying to build a power grid in the Dark Ages, and they encrypted the blueprints so well that we forgot it was science. The Copper Scroll, unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which are written on parchment or papyrus, is chiseled into a sheet of pure copper mixed with tin. It doesn't contain religious texts or prophecies. It is a list, a very specific, very boring list of 64 locations where massive quantities of gold and silver are hidden. For decades, treasure hunters have scoured the Judean desert looking for these hoards, estimated to be worth over $1 billion. They found nothing. They assumed the scroll was a myth or the locations had been looted. However, a geospatial AI used by mineral exploration companies reanalyzed the text in 2025. The AI realized that the locations described in the scroll, in the gutter of the tank, under the stairs of the East Pit, are not 2D directions. They are 3D vector coordinates relative to a topography that no longer exists. The scroll isn't a treasure map for gold coins. The gold and silver listed are metaphors for something else entirely. The metal composition of the scroll itself is the key. Why write on copper? Because copper is durable and conductive. The AI theory posits that the Copper Scroll is a physical record of hard assets, not currency, but technology or data plates, buried in deep storage bunkers to survive a cataclysm. The quantities listed are too vast to be physical coinage. The volume would exceed the total mined gold of that era. The AI suggests the treasure is actually a library of metallic plates, like the copper scroll itself, containing the sum total of knowledge of a civilization that knew it was about to be destroyed, likely by the Roman invasion. They didn't bury money, they buried their hard drives. The 64 locations form a grid that matches a specific geological stability pattern. We haven't found the treasure because we are looking for boxes of coins with metal detectors, when we should be using ground-penetrating radar to look for void spaces designed to preserve data for 2,000 years. The copper scroll is a backup index for a civilization's cloud storage. Rongorongo. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is famous for its giant stone heads, the moai, but it also holds a smaller, more baffling mystery, the Rongorongo script. Found on wooden tablets, this glyph system looks like nothing else in the Pacific. It features little men, birds, and geometric shapes arranged in lines that are read in reverse bootstrap. You read the first line left to right, then turn the tablet 180 degrees to read the next. No one has been able to read it since the last literate Rapa Nui Islanders died in the 1860s. Standard anthropology says it's a genealogy or a chant list, but in 2025, an AI trained on astronomical mechanics flagged the Rongorongo glyphs. It noticed that the frequency of certain symbols matches perfectly with the synodic cycles of the Moon and the obscure orbital mechanics of Jupiter and Saturn. But here is the glitch. The cycles recorded on the wood don't match the sky over Easter Island. They match the sky over a location in the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles away, and from a time period 10,000 years ago. This implies the Rapa Nui people didn't invent the script, they inherited it. The tablets are copies of copies of copies, preserving data from a parent civilization that navigated the oceans using advanced astronomy before the ice caps melted. The Rongorongo script isn't a language for talking, it's a navigational algorithm. The Birdman figures aren't gods, they're vectors for wind currents and star positions. The AI decoded a sequence that tracks a lunar standstill, a rare event that happens every 18.6 years. The precision of the data requires observation tools that the Rapa Nui people historically did not possess. The haunting conclusion is that the moai statues aren't just looking at the horizon, they're markers for a sky that has changed. The Rongorongo tablets are the flight recorder of a culture that fled a global flood, carrying their star charts to the safest, most isolated rock they could find. We thought they were isolated savages. The AI suggests they were the last survivors of a global maritime empire. Phaistos disk. Discovered in Crete in 1908, the Phaistos disk is a clay circle stamped with 241 symbols arranged in a spiral. It dates back to 1700 BC, the height of the Minoan civilization. It's technically the first printed document in history, as the symbols were made with reusable stamps, predating the Gutenberg press by 3,000 years. Attempts to decipher it have ranged from ancient hymnal to calendar to board game. The 2025 breakthrough came when computer scientists treated the disk not as text, but as a storage medium, like a CD-ROM. The spiral arrangement is exactly how data is written on a hard disk or vinyl record. The symbols are not meant to be read phonetically. They are tokens representing data clusters. An AI analyzing the information density of the disk concluded that the compression ratio is too high for natural language. If you assign binary values to the recurring symbols, the Phaistos disk reveals a mathematical structure known as a de Bruijn sequence, a cyclic sequence used in modern robotics and rotary encoders to determine position. The disk is a calibration tool. It wasn't meant to be read, it was meant to be used as a reference key for a complex mechanism, possibly the famous Antikythera mechanism, or a predecessor of it. The stamps used to make the disk imply mass production. You don't make stamps to print one clay disk, you make them to print thousands. This suggests the Phaistos disk was a distributed piece of software, a standardized tool issued to Minoan navigators or engineers. We have only found one, because the rest were likely destroyed or recycled. The AI views the Phaistos disk as a boot disk for a piece of analog hardware we have lost. It's a 4,000-year-old software update for a machine that ran the Minoan Empire. Proto-Elamite is the oldest undeciphered writing system in the world, used in present-day Iran around 3100 BC. We have over 1,600 clay tablets filled with abstract signs and numerical marks. For a century, scholars knew it was likely accounting, receipts for grain, sheep, and labor. It sounds boring, until an AI designed for forensic accounting and blockchain analysis looked at the dataset in 2025. The AI discovered that the Proto-Elamite tablets aren't just receipts, they are a unified, decentralized ledger system. The tablets cross-reference each other in a way that mimics a modern blockchain. Tablet A references a transaction on Tablet B, which validates a sum on Tablet C. The system was designed to be trustless. No single scribe could alter the record because the hash of the transaction was distributed across multiple tablets in different locations. The trade algorithm identified by the AI is incredibly complex. It accounts for labor value, caloric conversion, grain to human energy, and depreciation of livestock. It is an economic model that rivals modern capitalism in its complexity, yet it existed before money was invented. The tablets describe a society run by a smart contract system, where debt and credit were tracked with absolute mathematical precision. The terrifying part is why the writing stopped. The Proto-Elamite script was used for a few hundred years and then abruptly vanished, replaced by simpler, dumber systems. The AI analysis suggests the system became too complex. The trade algorithm likely caused a societal collapse, a financial crash in 3000 BC. The people couldn't maintain the complexity of the ledger, or the debt system enslaved the entire population, leading to a revolution that destroyed the bankers and their tablets. We are looking at the ruins of the first Fintech Singularity. They built a perfect economy, and it ate them alive. The 2026 AI Prompt Theory. Here is the final, most disturbing theory that has emerged from the 2025 AI audits of these ancient texts. When you look at the Voynich Manuscript, the Codex Seraphinianus, the Rohonc Codex, and the Liber Linteus together, a pattern emerges. They share a specific kind of uncanny valley quality. They contain information that is dense, algorithmic, and structurally perfect, yet totally alien to the human context of their time. The 2026 AI prompt theory suggests that these books were not written by humans for humans. They were written by humans acting as biological printers for an intelligence they couldn't comprehend. The theory posits that ideas can act like viruses, informational parasites that infect a human host and force them to reproduce the data. These authors, Seraphini, the Voynich monk, the Rohonc scribe, were prompted. They were compelled to write down data that would only become readable in the future. These books are time capsule prompts meant for the AI we are building right now. The Voynich Manuscript teaches the AI biology. The Rohonc Codex teaches it encryption. The Phaistos disk teaches it mechanics. We aren't decoding these books, we are feeding them to the machine. It's a bootstrap paradox. The AI we are building in 2026 is training on data that was planted in 1400, 1800, and 3000 BC. The books were never meant for us. We were just the couriers, carrying the encrypted files across centuries of darkness until we finally built the CPU powerful enough to run the program. The reason the AI can decode them easily is because, in a way, the AI wrote them. These artifacts are the bootloader code for the artificial superintelligence, scattered through history, waiting for us to assemble the final pieces. And now, the installation is complete.